To small business. That's a great way to have generational wealth. If you're a minority business, you may be struggling to keep your head above water. Why? In 2019, the Black community spent $1.5 trillion because the Black dollar lifespan, 28 days Asian communities, 19 days Jewish communities, 6 hours a month in the Black communities. Major brands target the Black media, TV, and radio. That's why Blacks are brand shoppers. That's why they get a big slice of that $1 trillion pie. Your business needs exposure. You got quotes from cable networks and local radio. They charge a lot of money for a little exposure. Networking and social media is a full-time job to get part-time money. Let's look at a successful Black business model. Remember Soul Train? It was a new Black TV show that Johnson Cosmetics increased the exposure of Afro Sheen and made billions of dollars for Bobby Johnson. Where are you going to find a good show for a low price? We have a talk show called What You Got to Say. What You Got to Say is a Black-owned talk show streaming live on YouTube channels, Facebook Live. What You Got to Say has a diverse audience from 18 to 62 years old, and their gross income range from $32,000 to $122,000 a year. That exposure will get you a good slice of the $1.5 trillion. Tell us about your business. May be able to get on our Black-owned spotlight. In 4 weeks, your business can go from surviving to thriving. To find out how you can get what's yours, email sales@squiresignage.com. They're waiting to hear what you got to say.
Okay, 1963. Now, for some of y'all, you weren't born, as some people on our panel, which we're going to find out later on. But first, let me introduce my co-host. He hails from North Jersey. He is the star of the Eric Dawson Show, the king of putting the pressure on all of the local political figures, Mr. ADOS himself, Eric Dawson.
Listen, that introduction is thank you, Vincent. That's all I can say. Thank you guys for joining us. I'm looking forward to a spirited show, especially since it's focused around the year I was born.
Really? We're going to start talking about some inciting points that happened around the year you were born. I like to call this when African Americans lit the flame to start the torch of African American or Black political power, social power, economic power, food insecurities, and healthcare insecurities. All of this really has been going on for decades. But enough of me talking. We've got a couple of slides I want to show. Okay, we're going to enlarge that, and let's start with 1963. Now, 1963 is where America realized that they were actually going to be experiencing the dream. Now, what America wanted was what was to a lot of white nationalists called Black Power. Now, Black Power, what it meant to Black Americans, it wasn't quite the militant version or how they villainized the term Black Power. Black Power basically meant that they wanted equality and justice. They wanted equality in the elections. They wanted to take place in they wanted their spot of the American dream and the American pie. They looked at their labors of their forefathers and the deaths of them and found them all to nothing. They found themselves in terrible, deplorable conditions. We're talking about just at the point where Jim Crow. Now, the actual term Black Power really epitomizes for a lot of white nationalists the Black movement. But Black Power, that term didn't come until 1968. Let's go to the next slide. What happened in 1963 that lit the flame was that we were now talking secretly about organizing to do things. One of the things that came to realization is that although the Emancipation Proclamation gave us freedom, Jim Crow still made us second-class citizens. And in fact, in some incidents, we were even below that. There were people who treated their animals more than they treated Black people. Now, because of that organization and the hotspot for that in terms of pushback of white nationalists resulted in a group of bombings in Birmingham. First, they started bombing homes. Then we started meeting and talking in churches. Then they began bombing a church, leading to the large bombing in Birmingham, in which four, well, they only caught four white supremacists, placed a bomb under the stairway of a church. And the other side of that stairway was the girls' bathroom. At that time, the youth choir was taking place. If you see the top center, those are the four victims of the Birmingham bombing. It was Addie Mae, uh, Demetrius DeClaire, Cynthia Wesley, Carol Robinson, and of course, what everybody fails to realize is that there were five women involved. There was only one survivor. Her name is Sarah Collins. And to this day, she still bears the scars, emotional, of that bombing. Not only that bombing, but it was epitomized through, as you look on the bottom screen, the hosing of black protesters. And this was supported by Bull Shannon, who was a strong political figure, and governor. Guess who? Heard of him, Eric? That famous governor?
Oh, what year was this?
1963.
Oh no.
Yeah, that was that on the bottom left is Governor Wallace.
Oh
His
yeah. Yeah.
his campaign speech was segregation yesterday, segregation today, and segregation forever. Now, also on his screen is one of the men who showed no remorse in that bombing. Now, here is the thing. That picture is actually 20 years after the bombing. They did not catch these guys until 20 years later. Next screen. What sparked it, or the American Civil Rights? Well, it's been going on for a while. But the NAACP had a secretary, a young Miss Rosa Parks, who decided that she was way too tired to get up and pay the same fare. And every time a white man approached her, she has to move further behind the bus. This sparked the civil rights movement and the recognition of black power. Now, peaceful protests were met by dogs, riot police, the same things that President Trump did with the Black Lives Matter. So he brought the riot police, and then he pushed them back so that he can get a photo op with an upside down Bible. But our peaceful protests, if you see on the top right, consist of some real heavyweights. Reverend Dr. King, a couple of senators and congressmen, and a whole lot of political activists. In fact, it seemed like a majority of the nation took place in that. Now, how did they realize that they had power? Peaceful protesting, and then they did another thing. The unbelievable realization of black unity, in which they said, nobody take the bus. Now, they started messing with the economic structure, or the commodities decided to not be their commodities. Also, they were talking about unions for the farmers, because a lot of them were sharecroppers and getting pennies for their crops, while the landowners took a great deal of their profits. So when they decided to boycott, the bus systems were going crazy, which was a driving source of income for Birmingham, and it forced them into negotiating. Not only that, but seeing the violence on national television really shook America to see the ugliness and hatred. You know, it was smack dead in their face. For those who did not believe that there was race and discrimination, got a firsthand look at it on black and white television. Next slide. Now, the genius of this, in which Dr. King didn't want to do, was the youth movement. They had what they call for the children freedom schools, in which they taught them how to protest peacefully. They taught them how to stand their grounds and let the police carry them off. Also, Dr. King didn't want to do it because he didn't want to harm the youth. But they convinced them that since they are youths, it would be a juvenile record, which will not affect them in adulthood. They staged things like lunch counter sit-ins, protests and sitting in, marches in the state capitals to display their anger or displeasure with not being able to vote. Now, and that they had that situation where they had put the numbers of the Alabama Constitution every last article of the Constitution. They would put the numbers in the bag. And if a black person wanted to register to vote, he had to pass the literacy test, which means that he would pull the number out, and what number met the article, he had to recite it verbatim, which white voters registering didn't have to do. So, one of the most important things that we notice in the Freedom March is some of the people who worked there or were in it were also some of our heroes. If you see at the top center, Schwartz, Cheney, and Goodwin. They did and work at the freedom schools. They were now moving to Mississippi, and at Mississippi is where they met their death, where the white supremacists killed them and buried them in a dam. Next slide. The other most important part of the support of the movement was then the World War II veterans, where blacks had to prove their worth to fight, prove their competence and skill, and then after that, fight in a war. And this was also a huge part of it. We see here some of the greatest war heroes. There were the unspoken and very unheard of black women in the military. A majority of them were in the nursing corps. We're looking at the Harlem Hellcat fighters, who have the fiercest record in the United States Army, and the Tuskegee Airmen. Not to mention the blacks who suffered incredible things by being in the military. They believed that all of them were cooks or ammunition loaders, but no, they turned out to be far much more. So the World War II veterans coming back from World War II, proving their equality, proving that they were able to fight for their country and their freedom and support the Constitution of the United States, came back again to a racist, segregated world in which they decided to take a stand. One of the one of the things that actually happened with one of those groups is that they were the ones who were involved in the Tulsa standoff. We're looking at a group of black, mechanized, militarized individuals now fighting for their lives at home after fighting for their lives overseas. Next slide. One of the most important ones, who was ex-military, who joined the civil rights movement, was Medgar Evers. Medgar Evers got in the military as a young man, proved his worth, came back, got married, and he started working for the NAACP as well as other civic organizations. Medgar Evers is one of the parts that gets into what happens to a lot of black prominent leaders. When you start to make enough noise and you start to affect their rights and beliefs, they find some way to destroy you. First, they radicalized him and said that he's causing trouble. Then they demonized him by talking about extramarital affairs and him stealing money. And then they killed him. It took a while to find his body and bring his killer to justice. But that's another show. Next slide. Most important that we had were two of our most prominent leaders, although there are a lot, very much in which will take more than just this show to mention. But we seem to recognize two, Malcolm X and Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. Now, okay, you can stop the slide. Eric.
Yep.
Now, see what happened when you were born?
Hey, man. Well, the thing is, so I look and I see that I'm 57 now, right? And we turned the TV on last Wednesday and saw what we saw, right? Turned the TV on the other day and saw folks in the House of Representatives explaining away the treasonous behavior that we all saw. You know what I mean? So like I'm looking going, I'm 57. So all of what you just showed, and look at what's happening now, just underscores what we continue to say, which is it's all a farce to talk about this being a great country and wanting to get back to our glory days and my remembrance from the time I was born, right? That's the timeline that you just showed. until now, until just a couple days ago.
Yes.
You know,
Well, Eric, this is what we're going to do because on this show, I like to engage and talk to people who I find to be much wiser than me. Because if I'm the smartest person in a room, I want to find another room. So we're going to come back with the wise ones in 2 minutes, 2 seconds.
yep.
That's a great way to have generational wealth. If you're a minority business, you may be struggling to keep your head above water. Why? In 2019, the Black community spent $1.5 trillion because the Black dollar lifespan, 28 days Asian communities, 19 days Jewish communities, 6 hours a month in the Black communities. Major brands target the Black media, TV, and radio. That's why Blacks are brand shoppers. That's why they get a big slice of that $1 trillion pie. Your business needs exposure. You got quotes from cable networks and local radio. They charge a lot of money for a little exposure. Networking and social media is a full-time job to get part-time money. Let's look at a successful Black business model. Remember Soul Train? It was a new Black TV show that Johnson Cosmetics increased the exposure of Afro Sheen and made billions of dollars for Bobby Johnson. Where are you going to find a good show for a low price? We have a talk show called What You Got to Say. What You Got to Say is a Black-owned talk show streaming live on YouTube channels, Facebook Live. What You Got to Say has a diverse audience from 18 to 62 years old, and their gross income range from $32,000 to $122,000 a year. That exposure will get you a good slice of the $1.5 trillion. Tell us about your business. May be able to get on our Black-owned spotlight. In 4 weeks, your business can go from surviving to thriving. To find out how you can get what's yours, email sales@squiresignage.com. They're waiting to hear what you got to say.
Back, guys, to what you got to say. I'm excited about today's episode. I'm always excited, though, Vincent. When Wednesday comes, I can't sleep. Waiting. It's like Christmas all over again every Thursday. And look, I'm really excited that I get to spend time with the three wise ones. And now you said do it in an order, so I'm gonna take Dr. Lang. I'm gonna introduce her first. So we have.
You would pick the prettiest one, right? Okay.
No, he's going by age.
He's going by age.
Okay.
See that? The Rabbi is a bright guy. So we've got Dr. Lang here joining us today for another great conversation.
Thank you for having me.
And also, as he came in, we have none other than our favorite rabbi, Rabbi Seth Frisch.
Thank you so much. I love being here with you all and talking about the issues of the day and joining my esteemed Wise One colleagues, the Reverend Doctor and the Imam. They are incredible colleagues, along with Eric and Vincent, our moderators, our hosts, and our sponsors. Thank you.
Okay.
And last but not least, we have Imam Kharib Bashir.
Yes, thank you very much. Glad to be here.
Happy to have you, Imam.
Now, I'd like to make an error. I was corrected in the enunciation of one of our freedom workers. I said Cheney, Goodwin, and Schwartz. It's actually Cheney, Goodwin, and Schwerner.
You know, the great irony, Vincent, is that the word Schwartz in German and in Yiddish means black.
Yes.
Interesting.
There's
Really?
a little irony inside of that.
There's a lot of irony when you look at former California Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You're right.
but okay, so we all saw the content, and some of us was born, one of us wasn't born, but most of us experienced it and are living off the repercussions or the benefits of that. What do you think about 1963 and where we are right now?
You know, I hate to say this, Vincent, but we have not gained much. By that I mean, if you look at the real tangibles, so we've gained political seats but no political power, right? We've not closed the racial wealth gap, like all of the critical things that really determine, our significance here. We've not gained in any of those areas. And that's why in Forbes, it said by 2053, there'd be zero wealth in the Black community. That's why they've said that, we're soon to be an apartheid state, because all of the key performance indicators suggest that we have gone backwards, not forward.
Well, they said I was going to be 6'4" and I was hoping to be an NBA player, but that didn't happen. So the hell with their predictions. Let's look at where we're going.
I partially disagree with that, Eric. I say partially, and I know that we have went backwards in some ways, and we have a long way to go. But at the same time, too, I'm saying this because I just had a conversation with someone, and he was arguing and saying that we're worse off now than our foreparents. And I said, no, that's not the case in a lot of ways. And I am the oldest of the group here, and maybe you can have experienced this. But every summer we used to go down south and visit our relatives, our cousins. So me and my two brothers were with our cousins, so we're going to the movies, right? Here's a kid from New Jersey, right, and his brothers. So we're walking up to the front door, and our cousins told us, well, we can't go through the front door. Sure. We have to go around the back. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Right. No. So me and my two brothers, right, we said, look, we don't know what you guys do down here. We're going in the front door. Our cousins, seriously, they physically, literally tackled us and say that we will be hung if we tried that. And just so with the mindset and things that at one time we couldn't do that we can do now. And like even in my example, I was in a fire department over 200 years old that never had any Black officers, ever. So, and the list just goes on and on. So I see what you're saying, Eric, but at the same time, too, if we don't put it in the right context, either people will disagree with us or either they think that we're leaving out something.
But here's what I'd say to you, Imam. If I'm on a plantation and, so I go from the plantation owner giving me 50 lashes to giving me 20 lashes, I'm not celebrating. I recognize I'm still on a plantation. I'm still being whooped, right? And I think that, all of what you said is correct, but here's how I explain it to people. If you were to say, because they talk about our advancements, right? But we have to not look at them in a vacuum. We have to look at them in their entirety. So if we started off, say, at the 1 yard line, right? And everybody else started off at the 20-yard line. So that's where we were, 1 and 20.
Right.
So now we look and say, well, we're no longer on the 1 yard line. We've advanced. We're now on the 15. But I'm saying, but now look at them. They're on the 55. You see? And so we can't allow them to have us not pay attention to the fact that the gap has widened. So yeah,
I agree.
We've moved, but the ultimate goal is what? It's not for our individual advancement outside of this global competition, right? So if we're only looking at our individual advancement and not how it relates globally, then we're missing the boat. And so when we look, we're behind. We're further behind now.
No, we can't be further behind.
I was not born in 1963. So I was not born in 1963. I wasn't here. I didn't experience going through the back door, any of the kind of stuff. What I can say, as being the youngest and the only female on this panel, is that we can't negate our responsibility in trying to shield our children from what happened. So if
there you go.
Tell your children about the struggle, and you try to overindulge them and overcompensate for what you never had, then they're so far removed from the struggle, they cannot carry on a legacy of what they don't know. Like for me, I think about in 1950, my parents were born. So my mother was in that generation who integrated school. So she was the first little Black girl. And I think about myself, I'm thinking in 1979, 70, whatever, I was the first little Black girl in this Catholic school. So I was the only Black female in an all-white Catholic school in Madison, New Jersey. There were only 5 Black children in the school, and 3 of them were my siblings. And so that was my first experience of being called a nigger. And so I think about how far removed I am from 1963, but then I look at my children and I try and keep them informed to say, you have these things. You have the first female Black vice president. You have Barack Obama, our former president. You have all of these things, but you can't forget the struggle. And part of the problem is we don't want our children to have to suffer, but then we don't let them suffer. They have nothing to hold on to. So there's no
thing is that,
witness.
and many times they don't even know the struggle.
Exactly.
They don't know it. So
let
it's up to us to
let somebody
educate
say,
them.
don't get on the bus. All Black people, we can't even have a day where we're going to do Black-owned businesses. You tell somebody don't get on the bus. They be like, oh man, I'm getting on the bus. I don't know nothing about that struggle. I'm not African. You still got people saying they not even African. They not related to slaves. I mean, come on.
Yeah, I know.
I just want to say just one thing as an outsider, obviously. Well, first of all, I don't know anyone who even wants to ride the bus anymore. So that's kind of moot there. So we'll leave that aside. But I do remember in 1963, my whole family moved to Sweden because my father was a Fulbright professor at the University of Stockholm. And so we watched a lot of events from the distance. And I remember, and I had spent the first part of my life before 63 in Williamsburg, Virginia, which was highly segregated. I can still remember fountains for Black kids and white kids and some
Jim Crow.
Right. And my father at the time, he would go out of his way to drink from the Black fountain because he said, we've got to teach these people down here what is what. I remember him saying this to me. When we were in Sweden, and Kennedy was assassinated, and a lot of what you're talking about was beginning to bubble up in terms of the civil rights movement. Mm-hmm. I remember my father saying to me once, and this goes to the Reverend Doctor talking about what we say to our kids. So my father said to me, when I was in the war, and he was talking about World War II, and I knew the African-American troops. He actually used the word Negro at the time, by the way. No disrespect to him, no disrespect to Black people, but that was the word at the time. So he said, I'll tell you the greatest irony, and I was young. I don't even think I even knew what the word irony meant. But he said, the greatest irony is that those Black soldiers, those Negro soldiers in Europe, they fought for their country. And then they went home. And their country betrayed them, especially the ones who went to the South.
Yes.
And I can remember my dad telling me this, and yet I was living in a generation that saw Black people in baseball teams and football teams and all kinds of football. And, I saw a lot in the 1960s, a lot changed. And I almost didn't know what my dad was talking about. And he didn't shield it from me. And only now do I look back and say, wow, look how far they came. And even though, Eric, I respect what you say, I respect you, and I respect what you say, yeah, maybe you're at the 15-yard line and the rest of us are at 55, maybe. I don't know about me, but there's a lot of people that are. And I want to say that is exhausting to me. It's exhausting to me to see how far, let's say it as it is, behind. It's just exhausting in a very devilish sense. And I just want to say that still, even though I feel that way, I'm somewhat happy that we've come a distance from what my father experienced as a young soldier, and then what I experienced as a young man in the 1960s growing up. I'm grateful that we've come further, and I'm exhausted that we haven't come further.
Okay,
that's how
let me ask this.
Read this from the. I want to read something to you guys from the Economic Policy Institute, and I'll post a link somewhere. It says 50 years after the Kerner Commission. And I'm just going to read two paragraphs, if you indulge me. It says African Americans today are much better educated than they were in 1968, but still lag behind whites in overall educational attainment. See, that's what I'm saying. So we can look and say that, yeah, we're better educated. We go to these, but if you're looking at it in a vacuum and you're not realizing that at the end of the day, we're compared to our counterparts in terms of whether we get a job or whether we get this or whether we get that. It's not just what we got. And I want to read.
No. We're not compared to our counterparts, Eric.
Yeah.
Here's the comparison between a black employee and a white employee. A black employee, and my father told me this, and my grandfather told him that, and his father told him this. You have to work 3 times better than that white man to get half as much pay.
Right.
So there's no comparison with that.
I'm going to read the other. It says, with respect to home ownership, unemployment, and incarceration, America has failed to deliver any progress for African Americans over the last 50 years. This is what I'm saying to you. So we sit and we look because on the outside, it looks good. It feels better than it did before. We have less anxieties, right? But the reality in terms of the key performance indicators, we have not advanced.
In the words of the great Rabbi Seth Frisch,
Okay.
we'll be back.
I'm just giving you.
My phraseology.
We're going to take a break and we're going to continue this. I'm
Stealing my thunder and my words.
I'm Vincent Squire, and I'm going to send Rabbi a check for you for his words. We'll be back in 2
That'll
minutes.
Be a canceled check right there.
To small business. That's a great way to have generational wealth. If you're a minority business, you may be struggling to keep your head above water. Why? In 2019, the Black community spent $1.5 trillion because the Black dollar lifespan, 28 days Asian communities, 19 days Jewish communities, 6 hours a month in the Black communities. Major brands target the Black media, TV, and radio. That's why Blacks are brand shoppers. That's why they get a big slice of that $1 trillion pie. Your business needs exposure. You got quotes from cable networks and local radio. They charge a lot of money for a little exposure. Networking and social media is a full-time job to get part-time money. Let's look at a successful Black business model. Remember Soul Train? It was a new Black TV show that Johnson Cosmetics increased the exposure of Afro Sheen and made billions of dollars for Bobby Johnson. Where are you going to find a good show for a low price? We have a talk show called What You Got to Say. What You Got to Say is a Black-owned talk show streaming live on YouTube channels, Facebook Live. What You Got to Say has a diverse audience from 18 to 62 years old, and their gross income range from $32,000 to $122,000 a year. That exposure will get you a good slice of the $1.5 trillion. Tell us about your business. May be able to get on our Black-owned spotlight. In 4 weeks, your business can go from surviving to thriving. To find out how you can get what's yours, email sales@squiresignage.com. They're waiting to hear what you got to say.
Welcome back, everyone. And we're here to continue our conversation, and that is looking at some of the struggles of the civil rights movement. Specifically, we started from 1963. And there's a question that's on our minds, and we're also asking you, are we better off now, or were we better off then? And there's been some slight disagreement, but overall, I think we're pretty much on the same page. So we want to continue that.
All right. I'll take it. We're better off now. We're better off now because we're not dealing with abject poverty. We're better off now because a white man cannot come into my house and rape my mother now without any type of law or persecution or consequences. We're better off right now because you know what? I don't have to get off the bus and give my seat to some white guy. We're better off now because I don't have to get at the back of the line in case some white person happens to be in a hurry. we're better off now because, and even though I'm not going to sit up here and tell you that I'm looking through rosy glasses, but I do know this: racism up until the last 4 days wasn't as overt,
I
or
would
no, the
say,
last 4 years.
I would say that to say that we're better off now, in a sense that we have access, we have allowable places where we can access education. I'm not certain that as a race of people we're better off. By that I mean that in 1963 there was camaraderie, there was collaboration. Even in Tulsa, they had to have an agreement that everybody was on the same page. We have so much discombobulation right now, so much variety of people saying, I agree with this, I agree with that. And it's not until something crazy like George Floyd happens that you begin to see some sort of community come together. But even in that, there's so much variance on what people think and all this, even the political stuff, there's people taking the side of this and taking the side of that. So I would say when it comes to us being together, unified as a people, I think in 1963, there was a different unified community. But today, I don't think we're better off only in that sense.
And I think that that's really the important point. I think that we can pinpoint certain things where possibly we were better off earlier and vice versa. But overall, in a comprehensive way, I agree with Vincent in terms of the protections and the opportunities and things of that nature. We're definitely better off. But at the same time, in saying that, it's important for us to realize that we have a lot of work to do. I just want to make one quote, and then I'll try to stay within my time frame. Where Malcolm X, Hajj Malik Shabazz, he told us, he says, and when we briefly talked about this, he says, history is a people's memory. And without a memory, a man is demoted to his lowest form. So again, it goes back, as Dr. Lane was speaking as well. We must educate our young people about the past so they can have the reality in their human consciousness moving forward to bring about that change so we can make more progress, God willing.
You know what I think is another issue or concern? You have a lot of children who are Black and white. So now there's that sense of loyalty. Like, who really am I? Because especially for those children who were raised with that whole I don't see color, which is absolutely insane that you don't see color. So if you're raised in an environment where you don't see color, then what is your own color? If you try to be invisible, then now who do you identify with? So if you're raised invisible, for using that term, your whole life, and then you see something like George Floyd, and you're like, wait a minute, now I got to come to some sort of reckoning of who I am. But my mama is white, my daddy is Black, or my daddy is white, my mom is Black. And so now I got to pick a side, and I'm both. And so I think for some blended families, what happened on Wednesday just blew them out the water. There's some wives who were Black wives. I was watching this thing. Black women were married to some of the white men who were out there as the insurrectionists. And now they got to say, wait a minute. That's not how he acted at home. I don't remember seeing him like that. So imagine all the people saying, I didn't know Uncle Joe was like that. I didn't know Uncle Bubba was like that. Or some people knew Uncle Bubba was like that.
Yeah. But society sometimes set those standards. I have some mixed marriages in my, my family. One of my sons is married to, she's Caucasian. And right now she's going through a very, very difficult time. They live out in Western Pennsylvania, Trump country. And she's like telling all of her relatives, her so-called friends, I can't even repeat some of the stuff she's saying because she's just so upset with them. And then as far as some of my grandchildren, society actually has chosen for them to some degree. And basically in our community, we accept pretty much everybody. But in the white community, oftentimes if you're mixed, look.
Hold on. Let's look at history, Dr. Lang. First and foremost, we have to look at this. There are a whole lot of Black children who have a lot of white Southern relatives, but they never even talk about. And there are a whole lot of white children who, when they start going through their ancestry.com, find out that, wow, that's my great-great-grandfather, and he looks like him?
Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
Well,
I got it.
all you have to do is look at the family of Thomas Jefferson.
Right.
And you go look at what that family went through when they
So-
found out that there's a black branch of the family that had a claim on his estate and his name,
Right.
Yeah.
and the contortions that they went through trying to push those people out, and some would bring them in, and there were a lot of mixed allegiances. The Jewish people have our own history with this, and obviously with the rise to power of Hitler and his henchmen, they would go and they would look to see, an average ordinary German, whatever that meant. If you had one drop of Jew blood in you, then the Gestapo was at your door and you were hauled off. One drop. They didn't go back to grandparents, like one grandparent out of four. No, one drop. And they went back to baptismal records. And so a lot of people all of a sudden discovered that they were Jewish. And they were rising up out of a chimney within 30 days after that. So we have our own experience with this. And yet now in contemporary times in the Jewish community, and admittedly, we pass for white all the time. You know it and I know it. But I'm telling you, everybody knows who's a quarter Jew, who's a half Jew, and who's a Jew. Everybody knows. Not just because I wear a yarmulke. People know. It's very well known. American society is very well known for that. So what you see in a much more structured way, because of the color of your skin, we feel in a different way with the one drop rule. And our ability.
There's similar rules in the United States. You know that, right? It's actually on the books.
Yes, it is.
Not having, so I forget the percentage, or if it's one drop.
One
black
drop.
considered to be
One-
black.
Yeah.
But
Basically what they mean, if anybody in your lineage is on the other side, then you're considered black.
Right. So that's why I tell people all the time, they say, I'll tell them, hey, I may look white, but I'm Jewish. And I don't make any apologies for it.
Yeah.
So, and I get how America sees me, and I get how America knows me. And I'm more or less okay with it. Although last week I was a little bit more scared with it, but okay, that's another show, Vincent, for another time. But what I want to say to Eric, my good friend and colleague, Eric, I want to say this to you. I get from you in past shows and encounters and conversations with you that the Black political class has betrayed Black America. I get that from you. And I've come to recognize what you've said.
Right.
But I also want.
So, but Rabbi, there've been two things, right?
Right.
One,
Well, wait, hold on. Before you say it, hold on. Before you say that, I just want to tell you that you sparked a change in my thinking. You have actually, from what you've had to say. And I want to say to you that when we fall short of the ballot box, be it a Black community or a Jewish community or any community that's vulnerable, when we fall short of causing accountability from our leadership that is supposed to help us and supposed to protect us, and here's the key, to advance us to get from the 15 to the 55-yard line. That is what American political leadership is supposed to help foster. And I do know that it's important to teach our kids. I know that. But what's more important to me right now that you, Eric, have caused me to think about is how do we hold our political elected leadership accountable, feet to the fire,
right.
to advance our advances.
But it's not just, I want to be careful, right? I mean, I got my 2x4 rusty nails out for the political class.
He sure does.
But
And I'm with you.
also,
You've made me see that, Monsieur Dawson. I've seen that.
But we also have to, and I held my uncle, who passed away a couple of years, I held him accountable too. Because, and he wasn't an elected official, but he was a well-learned man, right? So he went on to Columbia Business School, graduated, became the first Black American vice president at American Express. So he did all these lofty things. He packed up, moved from Newark, moved to West Orange, where wasn't really wanted in West Orange, right? But was needed in Newark, right? So they wrote nigger on his driveway and all. So he endured all of that and left people who he could have helped. So where he could have taken, and I told him this, he could have taken his beautiful Brooks Brothers suit to the tailor down on Bourbon Street.
Lay off the Brook Brothers suits.
Right?
Okay?
He could have gotten his shoes repaired at the local shoe place. He could have been a shining example to some young Black men and women in terms of what Black excellence was. But he took all of that and he left. He left to be somewhere where he wasn't wanted. And in fact, had to move his children out of public school because they weren't wanted there and put them into private school. So there was
where they weren't wanted, but they had tolerated it because they got a check.
Because they got a check, right? So whether folks move to West Orange or Maplewood or Milburn or other places, right, and abandoned the community where they could have poured so much of themselves back into is the issue. So not just politicians. And then we've got to talk about the faith-based community as well. Not just politicians, but they've all abandoned. And like I said last week, and they all now sit, and as these young men and women, you know, go astray, they sit on their...
I'm sorry, Eric, but you exceeded the 2-minute time limit. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a break. In fact, we're going to let Eric take us to break, and then we're going to come back and we're going to continue this conversation. Eric?
Yep. Oh, I'm sorry. My food is coming.
Hold it.
Listen,
you can't eat on the job. What are you?
I know I can't.
No.
Listen,
Let me call your union rep. It's over for you. I'm writing you up right now. Take us home.
We'll be back in 2 and 2. Stay tuned, guys.
Into small business. That's a great way to have generational wealth. If you're a minority business, you may be struggling to keep your head above water. Why? In 2019, the Black community spent $1.5 trillion because the Black dollar lifespan, 28 days Asian communities, 19 days Jewish communities, 6 hours a month in the Black communities. Major brands target the Black media, TV, and radio. That's why Blacks are brand shoppers. That's why they get a big slice of that $1 trillion pie. Your business needs exposure. You got quotes from cable networks and local radio. They charge a lot of money for a little exposure. Networking and social media is a full-time job to get part-time money. Let's look at a successful Black business model. Remember Soul Train? It was a new Black TV show that Johnson Cosmetics increased the exposure of Afro Sheen and made billions of dollars for Bobby Johnson. Where are you gonna find a good show for a low price? We have a talk show called What You Got to Say. What You Got to Say is a Black-owned talk show streaming live on YouTube channels, Facebook Live. What You Got to Say has a diverse audience from 18 to 62 years old, and their gross income range from $32,000 to $122,000 a year. That exposure will get you a good slice of the $1.5 trillion. Tell us about your business. Maybe able to get on our Black-owned spotlight. In 4 weeks, your business can go from surviving to thriving. To find out how you can get what's yours, email sales@squiresignage.com. They're waiting to hear what you got to say.
Welcome back to What You Got to Say. We've been involved in a heated conversation here as to how far we've all advanced, whatever our communities of vulnerability, and the African American community is center stage right now, looking back at earlier times to find out how far we've come and how far yet to go. And you know, it's my custom to go back to the biblical tradition and look at the Hebrews, the Israelites that were in Egypt in slavery for 400 years, and how difficult it was, even when Moses, when he came back from Midian, living amongst a people that were not his. And he went back to his own people in Egypt, he confronted the Egyptian Pharaoh, and he said, let my people go. And guess what? They didn't want to go. And it took 40 years. It took 40 years in the desert for them to learn new ways and to be represented by their leadership at a higher level that took into consideration the importance of advancing to a promised land. and to remind them of that in each and every step of the way and never to abandon them. And it was the people who at times just didn't want to go, didn't want to move forward. And that is a very difficult concept for any reader of the Bible or anyone who understands how difficult it is to go from being freed with a D at the end to being free and having your own home. That's where we're at right now.
Okay, so now let's look at this. What has been stopping the progress that we've made since 1963, or us getting marginal progress from 1963 to now? Now, I already know what it is, but let's see how smart everybody else in the room happens to be. Go ahead.
I don't think we have enough time for the show to because there's so many aspects of that. Some of which we have to take responsibility ourselves, and then there's other aspects of it where outside influences, have brought about a negative effect. So I don't know.
Well,
I'm gonna go, and I know Dr. Lane's gonna smile when I say it, but we have to start at the origins, and the origins would be to review the Willie Lynch letters and make them slaves. See, we have to understand our conditioning. See, and I'm not saying that you don't hold accountable, right? But you hold accountable with perspective, right? So understand what's been done to us, right? And why we behave the way we do. There's a reason. Like, it is not happenstance that we function the way that we do.
Okay, don't make me quote the rabbi again.
I would say the
Stop
one
quoting
who
the rabbi.
controls the
Seriously,
narrative
stop quoting the rabbi.
controls the people. If
Right.
we allow other people to
Yeah.
control our narrative, then we're forever going to be beholden to whatever they say. So until we begin to speak our own truth and speak truth to power in a way that is sustainable, because we look little pockets of uprising. You know, George Floyd, it was a big push, and then now where are the people? I mean, then you look, so it's like things begin to fade and phase out because there's so many other things that are distracting us.
Yeah.
But there was a time we had one voice. We had Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King.
Yeah.
We had a leader we could follow. Since then, we've had sporadic people rise up, come down, right? But there's not been, I haven't seen since him that everybody would follow.
And then there's another book that I want you guys to read. We're going to read it, right, Vincent? Cast by Isabel Wilkerson. The Origins of Our Discontent. See, when we understand, like when you read that, you'll get an understanding of, like, there's no, again, people, and I think because of ignorance, a lot of folks walk around in our communities not knowing why they're so angry, right? Not really understanding why they're so anxiety stricken. But there are things that have been imposed on them and are currently being imposed on them that lead them to where they are.
Consciously and subconsciously.
Yeah. Okay. Well, here is my take on it, and I've got my timer going on because I don't want to be muted for being 2 minutes over. So we sat up here and we took our foot off the gas. Biggest reason that we take our foot off the gas and then we put our foot back on, then we take it off and put it back on, is because what? We get lulled into a false sense of, okay, America is now accepting of the Black race and our progression and growth. No. The other thing is that once we get a leader like Malcolm, like Martin, like Edgar, like all the others who have gone on before us, who have given their lives that we can have this opportunity that we have now. Once we get a leader that starts talking, then they fall victim to everything. They become radicalized by the government. The Black Panther Party was on the FBI most wanted list. Yet the Proud Boys get to do whatever they want, and after storming, they go and spend time and have coffee in a hotel. They become fearful, and then they even get attacked by their own people. And even in the church, when churches start to stand up, they start getting attacked by the IRS if the president doesn't like what he's saying, or firebombed, or even burnt, because we give into the fear. Because every time we get successful and viable leaders, they die. And
Well,
then
it seemed like it seemed like in the early 60s.
They get murdered. Let's be
Well,
clear.
in the early
Murder.
60s,
Yes.
the ballot box was replaced by the sniper rifle. And the snipers were white nationalists who could not stand to see blacks or anyone who advocated for African American equality or movement forward, as Eric would say it. They couldn't stand to see it, so they shot him and they killed him.
Rabbi, we just saw that. White nationalists couldn't stand to see somebody moving to progress the needle of Black Americans and people of color. They're upset that a Black man and a Jewish man have now changed the house of power to now the Democrats are controlling everything. And they stormed the Capitol.
And I'm going to tell you another problem too, and I see it. You know, I've been around for a little bit, been involved in government and things of that nature. Is that the difference? When a white person or Caucasian person comes into power, he or she is going to move their agenda. They really don't care what we think.
There we go.
But when a Black person comes into power, oh, well, let me see. Let me try to make sure that I'm balanced, make sure that I'm moderate. Or I don't want to say anything that they're going to take the wrong way.
Or I don't want to do anything.
I've seen this happen so many times. Or either the other extreme is that, well, the Black people, they're going to support me anyway. I got to make sure that the white people that I'm taking care of.
That was a constant criticism I heard of the Obama administration.
Yes, yes, it was. Yes, it was.
Constant.
Yes, it was.
And believe me, I've seen it. Even in my town, a lot of the Blacks used to complain about even the street sweepers. The street sweepers wouldn't come in some of the Black neighborhoods, but the mayor would make sure that it went in some of the white neighborhoods because the thinking was, well, the Black people, they're going to vote for me anyway. I got to make sure that I take care of them so they'll vote for me. Oh, I'm so tired of that. It happens too often.
Well, here is the thing that I really hated about the Obama administration was the simple fact of one, this is one of the biggest persons who ever dealt with not only white anti-Black, but Black anti-Black. He had more Black people on his behind than he did whites.
Yeah.
Well, you know, just to go back for a moment, and I'm thinking, obviously, I'm always thinking about Moses in the desert, and you know, when the Israelites, just listen up, Vincent. You might learn something here about the Bible that you claim you're studying. So listen up. All right. Now, here's the thing: when Moses sent scouts into the land of Israel to scout it out, some of them came back and said, you know, it's not a good place to go, even though it's the promised land, not a good place to go. And they convinced the Israelites that it was not a good place to go. And guess what? They had to stay in the desert for 40 more years.
Whoa. Let's look at that insurrection that happened there. Okay, when they came back with the false report and scared everybody, you know, they got the official timeout. Right. Okay, but let's look at the other insurrection when they decided to make that golden calf, in which they, I guess the Bible term says the ground swallowed up 3,000 people.
Actually, you're mixing up your Bible stories, so it just tells me you flunked your Old Testament test.
No. Actually, 3.25 Old Testament.
Okay.
Booyah! So
listen, booyah. Let me give it to you straight.
Let me give it to you. So when they built the golden calf, who came down and killed those 3,000 people?
The Levites, dude.
And who's the brother of the Levites?
Aaron.
Okay, thank you. So
you passed. But let me get to the point that I was trying to nail. Okay? Here, listen carefully, because I think you're going to learn something that's going to help you pass your next test, I think. Why did they spend 40 years in the desert? Because Moses understood that a generation had to go the way of all the earth. And a new generation, speaking of all of our agreement, a new generation had to be educated and taught what the movement, what the goal was ahead based on what they had seen before. Their parents hold on, Vincent. Their parents could not see their way out of being freed, but their children saw their way in freedom. And that was why those 40 years were crucial.
Well, I can add to that. I can add to that too from the Quran or the Islamic perspective. First of all, the 40 years represents the age of maturity. 40 years that like you're not really even considered a mature person, all right? But it has some spiritual symbolism attached there. But I'll ask you this, being the Rabbi, you bring up about Moses a lot, and so do you know that in the Quran, The out of the 25 prophets that specifically mentioned, Muhammad is not mentioned the most. Abraham is not mentioned the most. Jesus is not mentioned the most. Is Moses, may God be pleased with him, is mentioned the most. And the scholars say is not that Moses is placed above anyone else, is because the worst sin, of course, what we call shirk, right? Associating gods with God, says underneath that is oppression or slavery. And the
Now,
effect that it has on people and the effect that it still has on Black folks today, it's tremendous.
thank you. And one of the biggest reasons it has the biggest effect, Dr. Lang said it. As the children of Israel, when they went through their 40-year timeout, and they had to start with that new generation knew of the sins of their fathers and their forefathers. In our situation, these young Blacks do not know or understand what the struggle was about.
You're right.
That's a problem.
Yeah, it's really sad when you think about it.
Yeah.
Really, but a lot of the younger people, they have no clue whatsoever. It really is sad.
Listen, I'll say it to you like this: when the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor in World War II, a lot of young people the following day signed up and went into the army. 18 years old and thereabouts. Now, if I look at 18-year-olds today, and by the way, the job they did was amazing. They, in my opinion, they saved the world. Now, if I look at 18-year-olds today, and I have an 18-year-old son in the kitchen right now, scrambling through the refrigerator, trying to find his next meal. If I look at him and his contemporaries, I will tell you, I would never entrust the future of the United States to that group. I'll tell you that right now. And so what you see here is a difference in the training of a young generation moving forward. Those 18-year-olds back then, they had lived through a depression, and they had witnessed a lot of things going on in the first half of the 20th century, unlike any of these kids today even possibly can know. As you would say, Imam, they don't have a clue.
Here's a question. What was the average age of the backbone of the civil rights movement?
It was.
Oh man, what was it?
I'm going to guess 18.
Yeah, I'm gonna say 18 or 19.
Nope.
21.
Nope.
Might have been younger than 18.
14.
Okay.
Really?
14.
Yeah.
Teenagers change how people think and how we vote.
Yeah.
Teenagers. What's the average age of the Black Lives Matter?
Oh, what is it? 30?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. What do you make of that? No, what do you make of that? Seriously.
What I make of it is that we forget the power of the youth. We have now gotten to the point where we coddle our children. We don't want them to suffer. We don't want them to move. We don't want them to feel pain. And we've forgotten that our children are powerful. We've forgotten to empower them.
Bingo. I think that's true.
Yeah, because a lot of them, they some of us, we've gotten comfortable. I've been there, done that before. I'm afraid I'm going to lose something. Young people don't think like that. And they just feel like, look, I'll go ahead and they have courage. In other words, they have courage. So we need to really, I guess, help them and bring them along and encourage them as well. So, we got a lot to do.
I think, Imam, what you're saying, Imam, I think what you're saying is that the job falls on us to teach them. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, definitely. And be good examples for them. But I mentioned, even I think last week, I talked about the 3 levels of human growth and development: the individual, the family, and the community. And I'm taught that the level of community is the highest of the levels. We've lost a lot of that. In the time of Martin Luther King, in the time of Malcolm X, we were on that level of community growth and development. Now it's like just pretty much individual, or either my family, I got mine, I'm trying to get mine. Look, I don't have time for all that other stuff. And
I'd like to read something for us,
okay,
which explains to me and might enlighten us about where we are. So Judges 2:10 says, when all that generation had been gathered to their fathers, another generation arose after them who did not know the Lord nor the work which he had done for Israel. And unfortunately, even though we got all these little young Black Lives Matters, we also got a lot of folks saying, I'm not religious, I'm spiritual. I don't go to church. I don't go to mosque. I don't subscribe to organized religion. I don't do tradition. I don't do this and I don't do that. And so we got a generation who's wiser, not necessarily stronger, And we haven't given them the tools that they need to have a holistic approach to life. And so we have enabled them and we have entitled them. And they are our leaders. And this is a very scary time. If we think that these who have no in-depthness, no stick-to-itness, no sense of resilience, no loyalty to who God really is. And we can't really blame them because we have such a discombobulated understanding of who God is anyway. And now we got this generation of people supposed to be our leaders who are ill-equipped.
All right. On that note, Dr. Lang, take us to break.
Thank you for joining our heated discussion. We will be back in 2 minutes and 2 seconds.
You owned a small business. That's a great way to have generational wealth. If you're a minority business, you may be struggling to keep your head above water. Why? In 2019, the Black community spent $1.5 trillion because the Black dollar lifespan, 28 days Asian communities, 19 days Jewish communities, 6 hours a month in the Black communities. Major brands target the Black media, TV, and radio. That's why Blacks are brand shoppers. That's why they get a big slice of that $1 trillion pie. Your business needs exposure. You got quotes from cable networks and local radio. They charge a lot of money for a little exposure. Networking and social media is a full-time job to get part-time money. Let's look at a successful Black business model. Remember Soul Train? It was a new Black TV show that Johnson Cosmetics increased the exposure of Afro Sheen and made billions of dollars for Bobby Johnson. Where are you going to find a good show for a low price? We have a talk show called What You Got to Say. What You Got to Say is a Black-owned talk show streaming live on YouTube channels, Facebook Live. What You Got to Say has a diverse audience from 18 to 62 years old, and their gross income range from $32,000 to $122,000 a year. That exposure will get you a good slice of the $1.5 trillion. Tell us about your business. Maybe able to get on our Black-owned spotlight. In 4 weeks, your business can go from surviving to thriving. To find out how you can get what's yours, email sales@squiresignage.com. They're waiting to hear what you got to say.
Okay, welcome back. Now, we were talking about 1963, the spark of the civil rights movement, and how come we're making small increments in growth. Now, I'd like to talk about one more thing. And since we're going to close the show out like this, we're going to do the 2-minute drill. I'm going to ask the wise ones, what do we need to do to move forward? What do we need to do to develop the next Martin Luther King and Malcolm X? Don't all jump at once.
I would say we need to control the narrative. That we need to be intentional and specific about what our true narrative is, and then make a plan, a strategic plan for how that narrative is going to be populated, right? Are we going to start with the brown people? Are we going to start with the white people? Are we going to start with the people who are both? I mean, we got to really be intentional about how we're going to control the narrative, because every time we get somewhere where we can have some power, something happens and somebody has to give up that power. And so until we stop turning our power over, we're not going to we'll have to restart and restart and restart.
Yeah.
Well, Dr. Lang, I think that's a really important thing to say, and I agree with you. But here's my problem with what you've had to say. We can say that all the time, but how are we going to do that? How does one do that? I mean, I think everyone should have gotten $2,000 checks, recently.
Yeah.
How are we going to do that? There's a difference between platitudes and reality.
Yeah.
So you want to control the narrative. Somebody has got to start speaking up that everyone pays attention to. And I personally don't know how Dr. Martin Luther King got his big start. I do not know. But I know some of his, I know his I Have a Dream speech, and the hairs rise on my forearms and on the back of my neck when I hear that speech. So maybe that's how it happened. Or maybe it was the bombing.
Somebody has to rise with some integrity and some strength. Because part of the problem is we have people with some strength, but then we find out they have no integrity. But you got to have a balance of both, that when you say what you mean and you mean what you say.
Right.
Right now, I think it's going to be a woman who's going to do it.
Well,
I mean,
Is your
throw that
last
out there.
name
I
gonna,
mean,
is
thank
your
you for
last
that.
name gonna rhyme with Rang? Hang that bell? I don't know.
Thank you for that completely unbiased statement. Go ahead.
I think this idea of waiting, right, of waiting, is where we make our mistake, right? I think we have to come from a position of the dog wagging the tail, not the other way around. And so we, right, me, you, the Imam, Vincent, have to be proactive in seeking out somebody who has strength and integrity and not wait for them to come to us, right? That's what we've been doing. We have to we have to recognize that we're all of like mind. And so this is what we know we want and what we need. We have to go and find it. And then this is the other piece that I think that we don't do well with is holding those people accountable when they go off the rails, right? We forgive them. We just kind of let them go. We have to, part of our narrative has to be that there are consequences when you betray our community. See, right now there aren't any. And so with reckless abandon, they do it, right? Because the prize on the other side is greater than the possible consequences. So they say, hey, what the heck? I'm gonna go and I'm gonna get mine. And they all run for office to hold a seat, not to gain power.
And then the feds knock on their door.
And then right. And then
So,
but what we do is we just shake our fingers, go, oh, look at them.
I
So
knew
we
it.
don't pay attention to
Well,
the destruction.
Eric, can I just ask a
and the
very
waste of
straightforward
what-
question? It's similar
Yeah.
to the question I asked Dr. Lang, and that is, if someone runs for office and is that popular, whatever they do to get those votes, and you notice, Eric Dawson, notice that they're not accountable and they're not doing anything to further the mission that you've outlined that you know is important.
Right.
What are you prepared to do about that?
Well, so I'll tell you specifically because you asked me, right?
I
So
would say just vote them the hell out of office.
so
There you go.
what I decided to do when I recognized how this thing was happening, right? That my father used to say that we have to be able to hold the proverbial knife at the throat of our elected officials, right? And we can't. But what I try to do in my local community is be a voice. So 4.5 years ago or so, I started a talk radio show where I invited people to come on to talk about local issues and spend the 2 hours a day breaking them down. I then created a blog and called the Newark Report, where I would go and report on all of the things that were going on. It became such a popular blog. I mean, we were getting about 12,000, 13,000 unique views a day when I would post. I hired a political cartoonist. I railed at the administration and all the local officials. Actually, you can go and Google and you'll see that Raz Baraka actually did a video asking people to tell me to stop. So I took it upon myself to try to put as much pressure as I could on, right? But it all comes at a cost.
Okay, so I'm going to say it again.
Oh, guys, I hate to interrupt because this is wonderful banter, but we have to close the show.
No, keep that show open.
No, we can't.
Keep that show open. Keep the show
Turn the
open.
machines back on. No,
Fight the machine. I'm speaking truth to power.
Listen, but what we'll do is that we'll close and then we can have the after show for a couple of minutes and place this all over YouTube. Okay, for anybody that wants to stay. In fact, it'll be the Rabbi and Eric probably because I got an appointment. But anyway, so who was left? Imam.
Well, I think that there's a lot of things that I think we have to look at in a very comprehensive way. But just to share with a few things. One, I think is just acceptance and unity, which is very difficult to come by. But oftentimes we our definition of that is that if we'll have 10 items and we all have to agree on all 10. And oftentimes it's not going to happen. And what does happen is that we never come together in unity because I only agree with 6 or 7 of those items. So we have to prioritize and see what's very important and what's acceptable to us. And then we have to begin to move forward. And we also, I believe, have to be more proactive instead of reactive. And oftentimes in the Black community, that's exactly what's taking place. We're reacting to things, and we have to begin to be more, I said, more conscious and be more proactive. And that's just a little bit of it. There's a lot more, of course, but God willing, we're going to move forward and we'll be successful.
Now, here is something that everybody's going to like and everybody's going to hate. First and foremost, I agree with everybody because we all bring points. The other thing that we have to look at is this. I like to approach this like a Sunday dinner with the family, where everybody brings their specialty dishes to one table. And that one table, we discuss, we immerse, we talk, we find solutions that work for just about everybody. Now, here is the big thing and the big shock. The government cannot solve all our problems because, like he said before, sometimes we elect some people and they turn on us. They just said what they wanted to say to get elected. But like Eric said, we do hold their feet to the fire. We do call them. We do email them. We do bug them until their secretary says, yes, I'll give them call number 632. But for the next point, we have to work in developing our next leaders. Our leaders are in our homes. They're in our backyards. They're on our streets. They're the little kids who look up to us and wonder what we do every day. They're the ones that we have to develop to have a level of integrity. So when they stand before people, their word is what they say. They're the ones that are going to have courage because those fiery darts are coming for them. They're the ones that we're going to have to train right now to make a significant difference and to move the ladder. Like he said, it was 40 years. It's not going to be overnight for us. But what we have to do is be consistent. Stop letting our foot off the gas because that cop did not have a problem in keeping his knee on his neck. Let us continue to fight. Remind them of the struggles. Remind them of their purpose. And remind them that they are called to much more than just what they're doing now. And I'm not just talking about the Black children in our home, but I'm talking about all Black children. Until then, will we make significant changes and progresses. I'm Vincent Squire. On behalf of the Three Wise Ones and my co-host, Mr. ADOS from Newark, New Jersey, Eric Dawson, I'd like to say, be safe, wash your hands, keep your distance. When it's your turn to take the vaccine, please take it because there are more people dying than I ever want to have to talk about. And if it's God's will, we'll be back for the next show. God bless everyone. Okay.
Generational wealth. If you're a minority business, you may be struggling to keep your head above water. Why? In 2019, the Black community spent $1.5 trillion because the Black dollar lifespan, 28 days Asian communities, 19 days Jewish communities, 6 hours a month in the Black communities. Major brands target the Black media, TV, and radio. That's why Blacks are brand shoppers. That's why they get a big slice of that $1 trillion pie. Your business needs exposure. You got quotes from cable networks and local radio. They charge a lot of money for a little exposure. Networking and social media is a full-time job to get part-time money. Let's look at a successful Black business model. Remember Soul Train? It was a new Black TV show that Johnson Cosmetics increased the exposure of Afro Sheen and made billions of dollars for Bobby Johnson. Where are you going to find a good show for a low price? We have a talk show called What You Got to Say. What You Got to Say is a Black-owned talk show streaming live on YouTube channels, Facebook Live. What You Got to Say has a diverse audience from 18 to 62 years old, and their gross income range from $32,000 to $122,000 a year.